G'day jabronis, it is the Verd, back with you again. It's been a ridiculously long time since I've done any videos like this, so bear with me if it's like, is this camera even straight? Cool. Yeah, bear with me if it's a bit shoddy. I don't know, I felt a bit inspired over the Worlds weekend. For those who like are following me, I obviously went over to the World Championships for the Pokemon trading card game. Um, and what I it was probably the last time I was going over as a player. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love to play the Pokemon trading card game. I just have been shifting more into doing judging of the TCG, VGC, and Go. And so, what I wanted to kind of shift my motivation towards, I suppose, in the future is not only obviously increasing my skills at TCG to be a better judge. I think I've got to a level now where I feel very happy that I can adjudicate everything properly, but I want to do the same for VGC and for Go. So my hope in the future with this channel is actually doing content for all three of the games. And almost like delving into a lot, like, because VGC I used to play, obviously, if people remember, used to play VGC, and with Go, like, I just want to learn them all because it helps me become a better judge of those games, but also I think it's cool having, you know, somebody kind of learning these things again and like rediscovering them, and then you kind of get to go along with the journey. And if you haven't really looked into these games either, we might be able to kind of reach the same conclusions, hopefully. We'll see. I don't know. I think it's going to be a cool experience. I want to do that for sure. So focusing on all three games for sure. I also want to get into doing some commentary. I think I've done like some in the past, and a big thing that I've noticed more and more with seeing like my friends, like, you know, Shy Burton's a big one. Like, getting to meet him in person was insane. I can't believe I did not get a photo with him. I'm so sad. But it's one of those things where I've always felt that I would be good at doing commentary. I've always felt like I give a very good analysis of the game. I'm learned enough to give, you know, the analysis that people want to see. But obviously it's like hard to get opportunities being in Australia. So I figure if I can do my own stuff, like I've got some friends, we want to set up doing like recordings of games for whether it be locals or a challenge or a cup, doing recordings and then doing like post commentary and getting some things like that in there. So I'd like to see us all kind of incorporate that if possible. I think that'd be really cool. So that's another big thing. And I guess the last thing is just like doing. So as you guys would know from my Twitter, which is at the _Verd29, I believe. I do like Thursday polls a lot of the time. So like Thursday evening in Australia, where I am, we have like a locals, but it's usually like a fun local. People just bring like whatever deck they want, having a goofy time. It's more casual players that rock up, so I try not to play the most broken decks. I just try and like put together a poll. I'm like, this is a pretty funny deck. Let's see how this goes. And usually I just post a list and do the report, and people seem to really like them. So what I'd like to do is actually do deck profiles on here, kind of explaining why I built the deck this way, what the actual function of the deck is, because a lot of times people ask me like, why is that in there for this? And it's like, I feel like I need to kind of do these videos to explain them a little bit better. I don't know if I'll record like my gameplay on Thursday nights. It's not like super serious, so I don't like often play to the best of my ability, but I can definitely do some stuff on that in the future. But the main reason I'm here, and the main reason I'm kind of doing this video today, is going over my deck building process for the World Championships. I went through, I think it was about 3 or 4 different lists that I felt confident with going into the World Championships. And eventually I settled on one, which ended up being Richard Drago V-Star. But that is not where I started. So what I wanted to kind of do today was go through all the decks that were kind of under consideration, and then like, I guess my thought process as to why I chose Drago over them, like what the process was from. Basically, it's the timeline from NAIC finishing to getting to Hawaii. There were 3 main decks that I was deciding between. There were a lot of other decks that I could have considered but chose not to, and I want to try and give my justification for each one. So strap on in, and we are going to discuss all that stuff. Okay, so first and foremost, when NAIC finished, The main deck that I was high on was Lost Box. It had just won the event. Andrew Hedrick had just won the event with a list that was basically this deck, but instead of the Serendipity, it had a Poké Gear. And I just sat there and thought, looking at Shrouded Fable, I was like, really? Like, you could just cut the gear for the Fez, and the deck seems really good. It still runs exactly how it should. All the lines are still very smooth. And I felt like it already had a decent matchup spread. Now, obviously, like, the annoying parts about the deck were, one, that, as we saw with the final, the Gardevoirs were playing both Klefki and Fluttermane, which did limit a lot of the output that your deck could have, but we try to supplement that by having, obviously, like, the 4 Chorus, 4 Pokestop, and 4 Lost Vac to be able to try and churn through the deck still without necessarily needing to use Comfey. And if you can still get to 7 before they could get the lock with Gardevoir, then usually you could put yourself in a strong enough position, even without Flower Selecting, to put enough pressure on them, because if they have Klefki in the active, then if there's a Manaphy on the bench, it doesn't actually work, and you can just, like, Gren whatever you want. I felt like the deck's Charizard matchup wasn't bad. Obviously, I remember watching Andrew Hedrick, I think James Cox's video, and he talked about how important Sableye was in that scenario, and so, like, my initial testing group were very like, there's no way Lost Box can beat it, and if you're going to beat it with Lost Box, you have to play Shaman V, which was an interesting concept that we thought about, because we thought Zarb was going to be super popular heading into Shrouded Fable with the Dusclops line. I found that because of them playing the Dusclops, that Sableye was even stronger, because there could be turns where you could just Sableye and KO Duskull and Pidgey, and that felt really, really good. You force them to have to play the 60 HP Pidgey, and if they put down another 60 HP Mon, you get a lot of value out of that. I still felt that Iron Thorns put a bit of pressure on the deck, like early game. Being able to one-shot a Pidgeot, as well as denying Charizard and Radiant Charizard, felt really, really good. So, that was another temptation. The main reason that I didn't actually pull the trigger, I still actually think, like, even thinking about how the meta is now, that there is a world where I could pull the trigger on this deck. The main reason I didn't is because of Regidrago. I didn't realize, like, until we really delved into the set, just how silly Drago was going to be. I think also the fact was that the Kyurem was super annoying. There were definitely ways you could play around it, especially with this deck. So there were turns where I was talking to my friends, and, like, I was saying that you can just time it where you have, like, 2 Choruses resolved and then Power Pad them back in, so there's actually no Chorus in bin for them to use with the Kyurem. But because of how volatile the deck is with Pokestop, you would probably have to run a second Power Pad to ensure that there are no Chorus going there. Or you, like, Power Pad Choruses back in and then Lost Zone the rest of them and just get yourself to, like, 7 and call it a day. The strategy just wasn't very consistent. There were times where you just didn't have a way to get Chorus back in, and allowing Kyurem to just, like, Trifrost you for your life savings sucked. Even with, like, guys such as Iron Hands, Iron Thorns in play, even Serendipity, a lot of these guys are almost getting 2-shot by this Kyurem. In fact, they can use Hawlucha on Iron Hands and Iron Thorns to then make it a clean 2-shot with Kyurem. Because we're not playing Lost City, they just get to do it again with Stretcher. Like, it's very easy for them to recycle the Kyurem as an attacker. So that was kind of the main reason. The other reason with Drago was that, and I also discovered against Raging Bolt, the deck didn't really have a great, like, nuke option, I suppose is the best way that I can put it, because in previous iterations of Lost Box, like, the main 2 attackers that I've been quite accustomed to using in terms of a nuke is either Roaring Moon EX or Radiant Charizard. And what I mean, I guess, by the nuke aspect is it's a Pokemon where, I guess Ursaluna can kind of count, but it's a Pokemon that just has the ability to just delete whatever is in front of it. And usually Ursaluna fits that bill. But obviously Ursaluna, I don't want to have to attach 5 energy to it before any other actions to kill a Raging Bolt. I'd rather, if I could, attach 3 energies to a Roaring Moon and then just try and delete a Drago that way. Especially because I'm running, like, 4 Pokestop. I feel like maybe the Roaring Moon would have been really good. Now, obviously fitting the Roaring Moon in with this list would have been very, very difficult, because this entire list is built to be incredibly streamlined. I would definitely have to, like, adjust some of the counts, but I really would like to keep the 4 Pokestop and the 3 Lost Vac, because with Roaring Moon, you want to have as many stadiums as possible to get value off of Calamity Storming early, especially against Drago and things like Miraidon. Calamity Storming them early puts a lot of pressure on, it forces them to have to KO you, and if they don't, you can either Calamity Storm again or get a free gouging and move very far ahead in the prize trade. So whether maybe the problem is you can't really cut Iron Thorns to do it either, because Iron Thorns is very crucial for the Lugia matchup as well as Drago. It's pretty good against both. So fitting the moon in would be difficult. The main deck that I have seen that I think is looking the best in terms of how Lost Box goes forward was the list that Marco Cifuentes got top 64 with, where it was Sablezard with double Mana Fee. And that makes a lot of sense. I actually would like to try that list, but then also trying, I think it was Brennan Kammerman used to play Sablezard with Roaring Moon. So maybe something like that, because with the Roaring Moon in the list, you could also still use things like Monkey Dory, which is really strong into Drago, really strong into other decks that's like shift damage counters around. And also, like, it's decent with the Roaring Moon, because it means that, like, you can hit somebody and then potentially shift some damage off the moon before doing another attack. I don't know. There are possibilities there. Monkey is a weird one in Lost Box. I don't know if it's good or not. It's just interesting that it exists. But this was basically like the first list that I looked at, and I was like, okay, maybe I can make this work. But Hiram and Reggie Drago just proved to be a bit too much of a hurdle to kind of climb over in terms of, like, just... Also, like, as you saw from the World's meta, 25% of the meta was Drago, so I think I made a good call. Weirdly enough, I didn't actually pair any Drago on the day, and the matchups that I did pair were actually ridiculously good for this exact version of Lost Box, but I know that if I got to day 2, I would have paired it to Drago, and I would have got murked. So, it's one of those things where sometimes you can just make it a race, where if you play the deck fast enough, you can just put enough pressure on. Like, there are turns where I can, like, cram into an Ogerpon and then say I can hands that next turn and then threaten recycling hands again to KO Squawk for game. It's unlikely, but sometimes they will put down Squawk and that does become a win con. It's one of those decks where it's interesting. If you know that, like, nobody's going to be playing Drago at your locals, I actually still think this deck is really, really good. It's a little bit iffy into Raging Bolt because your only real big attacker against them is Blood Moon. You can try and start Thorns and hope that slows them down, but it's a really bad strategy, honestly. I think that the way this deck needs to move forward is either with a Sablezard passage or with Turbo Roaring Moon. I think, like, those are the ways. I think maybe, like, Paradox Box needs to come back, where it's, like, Roaring Moon. There is a version as well that is tempting, which I think is called Sablegren, where it's basically Sablezard, but you run Ursaluna and you run Greninja, and you still run, like, the regular package of things. And that might be okay. I don't really know. I haven't tested enough of that, but that could be a consideration. For now, I was happy at this point, like, 1 or 2 months into, like, the testing to say, okay, this is probably not going to be the play for Worlds. It just didn't have enough good matchups. But it is still a deck that I think about a lot, and I do want to think about how we can optimize Lost Box more in the future. But for now, it was put on the shelf. Okay, now we are moving on to the second list that I considered for Worlds, which was Bolt Pon. Bolt Pon, for those who aren't aware, is a combination of Raging Bolt and Teal Mask Ogerpon. The whole strategy of this deck is basically to just jam a bunch of energies into play, and Raging Bolt attack does 70 times for each energy that you discard. So you're basically just trying to deal... there are certain increments of damage that we're looking at. The main 2 increments are with 4 energy in play, we're dealing 280, and with 5 energy in play, we're dealing 350. Also to note that 1 energy is 70, which was pretty good for a lot of, like, the little guys in the meta, like your Charmanders, your Raltzes, Duskulls, things like that just got taken out by that, which was really important. Our testing group came to, like, a 58 card deck that we felt pretty confident with. And, I mean, like, obviously the deck worked because one of the guys in our testing group was James Goring, who, if you didn't see, got top 8. He actually was, like, in a really good position and had, like, so many favorable matchups in top 8, but unfortunately paired the only bad matchup in Roaring Moon, which sucked. Like, that was just super unfortunate. But still super proud of him for his run. And this is the list we kind of worked on. So there was, like, 3 or 4 of us that were pretty keen on Raging Bolt for a while. I shifted over to it from Lost Box because the main reason I liked Raging Bolt was that it just went super fast. It also just felt like the most consistent deck in the format. And for me, especially like a big championship like Worlds, or just any, like, regional, I think if you can play a really consistent deck, then that's really, really good. You're in for a great time. And this is kind of the 60 we settled on initially. Now, obviously, what ended up changing from the 60 to what James played, and the other two guys that played Bolt at that event, was they cut third stop and fourth gear for 2 Bravery Charm. Now, the reason they did that is because in our testing group, people were also playing Regidrago, and Radzard was becoming a bit of a problem. But it was also because in our initial testing, instead of third Pokemon catcher, we were playing Bundle. And we soon realized that with Regidrago playing things like Kyurem and Hawlucha, as well as a Radiant Charizard, what they could just do was bench a 1-prizer and have Radzard in the active and say, well, Bundle is basically useless for you now, so you've just like got 1 less good gust. And we realized more and more that Bundle was actually like a bit of a liability. It wasn't actually that good. Sometimes it was an awkward starter, whereas like every other Pokemon, we weren't super annoyed at starting. Fez was like a little bit annoying to start sometimes, but like fine. So we shifted it more towards like just gust. Like we were pretty close. Like we could have pulled the trigger and said just 2 Pokestop and then 4 catcher. I think you could totally play that if you wanted to as well. I'm on the fence about that. I like 3 stop just because I like the amount of items that are in the deck. I think there are enough items to where 3 stop has value. But I also do really like 4 catcher for this deck because it allows you to be so aggressive at the start and just hunt down whatever you want through the game. Like having 6 gust cards in this deck with it still being so consistent is ridiculous. What they ended up doing was adding the Bravery Charms though, because there were 2 main reasons that I can think of. Oh, not that I can think of, I just know. So it was mainly for Radiant Charizard because that meant that Drago lists weren't playing Jamming Tower. A lot of them were just playing Temple of Sinnoh, so they didn't really have a way to maneuver around it. And they only had limited gust. They had like it was 2 boss and 1 prime catcher, and usually they wanted to resolve other stuff instead if they could. And they couldn't bundle around it because of how it had been designed. So the other reason was that on a Raging Bolt, a Bravery Charm means that an opposition Raging Bolt requires 5 energy to KO it. You could play Lost Vac, which obviously would kind of swing things a little bit, but it was hard because if you didn't time the Lost Vac exactly when the KO was taken, the Bolt player could still just use Switch Cart on the next turn, if it lived, and then it would move out of range. No, it would still be in range, I'm pretty sure. Yes, it would still be in range, so Cart didn't quite get you there. But what would usually get you there in this scenario was the fact that against Drago again, and against other decks where they just couldn't break the 280 threshold. Drago is a good example where most Drago lists were playing Giratina V-Star. They weren't playing Raging Bolt as their big like dragon attacker, and with you being at 290 HP, Tina couldn't one-shot that Bolt. So that meant that they had to find Gust like almost every turn to stay in the matchup. And given how popular Drago was, that was a massive, massive advantage. Now, personally, I feel like we can probably just beat Drago anyway, because another big damage factor with Raging Bolt is that with 3 energy you do 210, and both Regidrago and Raging Bolt play Ogerpon. So you can just hunt down the Ogerpons early. This is where like having the extra catcher. Like honestly, if it was me, I actually, upon reflection, look at this list and say maybe cut the 3rd Pokestop before catcher, and like I'm pretty happy with that list. It just goes fast. It does exactly what you think it's going to do. You saw James play it on stream, so you'd be able to see. I think all the recovery cards were correct. We tried the idea of Night Stretcher, and it was okay, but it just didn't give as much impact as what Retrieval and Rod were able to do. Rod plus Palpad in a Pokestop build is always just a really good time, so I think that always just makes sense. We did cut 1 Grass Energy, which was like a little bit sketch, but because we were playing the extra energy retrieval as well as the Super Rod, we felt like we had enough recovery to get away with it, and obviously James did. So this was definitely a consideration. The reason I actually didn't end up playing this deck was because we had been discussing a Drago list that was really cool, and I remember playing this list into Jordan Palmer at an event like just before we went to Worlds, and he just smoked me with like Radzard and stuff. And obviously I could have put in the Bravery Charms, but I just looked at Drago and it reminded me a lot of Mewtwo and Mew, and I was like, oh, I freaking love Mewtwo and Mew. That was one of my favorite decks of all time. So I really wanted to play something similar to that, and so I ended up going off a Bolt, but I still think this would have been an amazing, it ended up being an amazing pick for Worlds, because our list was so streamlined and so effective. You can definitely add the Bravery Charms if you want to run it how James did. I personally don't think it's as necessary if you're able to just get away with the amount of gusting and pressure that this deck can provide. The main reason why this deck is so strong and people are kind of underrating it is because Its mid and late game aren't as strong as other decks, but its early game is unparalleled. And if every other deck is struggling to set up, Bolt just punishes them every time. So that was the main reason. But I did end up choosing Drago, and I'll try and explain it as well as I can why. Okay, so this was the Rage Drago list that we ended up deciding on for Worlds. I piloted this exact list. Callum Pinniger, I think, piloted a similar list. The only difference was that he cut third Iono for second Stretcher, which was fine. The initial list that we had was a little bit different to this. So instead of third Iono, cancelling Cologne, and no, it was third Iono, cancelling Cologne, Mew, and Hawlucha. Those 4 cards were replaced by an extra copy of Night Stretcher and a 1/1/1 Dust Noir line. So we were testing Dust Noir in Dragapult in Regidrago because we felt like it was really strong into some of the meta. And it was a really cool concept that nobody else had been like testing around with. Everyone just thought, it's too bricky, it doesn't do what it needs to do, and we were feeling and testing like it was nuts. The actual reason that we ended up dropping the Dusclops package was because initially we were like, we use this to beat Charizard. And what we soon discovered was that with how powerful this deck was in the way that it worked, that we just beat Charizard anyway. So we were like, okay, if that's the case, we want Cologne because we respected Iron Thorns. A lot of people didn't at the tournament, but we did. You have to respect Iron Thorns. Cologne also is really broken with Kyurem. Being able to punch through with that is really strong. And then we also wanted the Mew EX. I personally wanted the Mew EX. I think Mew, Fez, and Squawk in any turbo deck, I just love. This isn't really turbo, I suppose, but the Mew plus the Fez just means you have ridiculous recovery at any point in the game. You can get rocks or stamp to 2 and say, I dropped to 6 anyway, so she'll be right, which is very silly. Lucha was weirdly good. I didn't think much of this card initially, but then there were just turns where I was like, this is actually broken. For instance, I had a game against Iron Thorns where he played a Colress's Tenacity. I bumped his Lost City with a Temple of Sinnoh. I owned him to 4 and then just put a Kyurem in play. And because he had 2 benched Iron Thorns, I just Lucha'd both of them. And they were both 2-shot by Trifrost. And that just netted me a ridiculous amount of prizes and tempo. It was so silly. So that was really cool. The list itself is very vanilla. I mentioned that on Twitter. I don't think this had any crazy text in it. This ran pretty much everything that you would expect from a Drago list. I think the Australians played a very similar list to this. The only difference was that they cut 1 Dragapult for a Goodra, and they cut 1 Fire for an extra Grass. Now, I don't mind the Fire for the Grass. That can go either way on that one. Cutting down to 1 Pult it's interesting for sure. I really liked 2 Pult. Pult is your best attacker in this deck by a country mile. So cutting that down to 1 is a little bit sketch. But if it works, it works. I mean, a bunch of the Aussies did it, and they all got top 64. So I think you could definitely do it. It is definitely risky though. I think the energy count was fine the way it was, but that's because I played Radiant Charizard. I felt like having the extra fire to enable both having a Drago and a Zard set up consistently was really good to have multiple attackers kind of prepared to go. With only 2 fire, if you prize 1, then your 1 fire becomes just a constant liability that you have to find. That being said, having the extra grass does mean that your Ogre-Pons are usually online more consistently. So I could go either way when it comes to that choice. Everything else about the sector was perfect in my eyes. In terms of what I wanted from a Drago list, this is it ticked all the boxes. You don't need to run 3rd Iono, but I just found it so good. 3 Iono plus Red Zard made me feel like I could beat Boltpon because I didn't think anybody else other than our testing group was going to play with Bravery Charm, so I felt like if I spammed Iono and spammed Radzard in the mid to late game, that eventually they wouldn't be able to draw into any outs. And in testing, that was true. But in retrospect, I actually didn't pair any Raging Bolt either. So I didn't pair any Drago or Raging Bolt. And obviously, if I paired Drago, I think I would have preferred having the Goodra. I think on reflection, Goodra is a very good attacker. So I could see the Dragapult EX being cut, one of them, for a Goodra. I'd feel weird about it, but I would understand. So, but I just think that 3rd Iono is still so strong into a lot of matchups. So I still would want to keep that. But the list basically just runs with the Ogerpon kind of being the place to dump a lot of the energy, and then you just E-switch them onto the Drago, and then you just copy ridiculous attacks. You only have like 3 dragons a lot of the time, but like obviously 4 if you're adding Gudra that you're copying attacks for. So Dragapult does 200 and 6 damage counters to the bench, which is just ridiculous. Giratina has a flat 280 but lost zones 2 energy. Kyurem does 110 to 3 Pokemon, but you have to discard all your energy. And then Gudra obviously does 200 and then takes 80 less damage. Now the Gudra would have been really good into the Lugia matchup specifically, because in that matchup what you're meant to do is declare Gudra into a Lugia, and if they're playing Cinccino and they don't have room on their bench for a Weirdeer, then you present a Regidrago with 360 HP effectively, which means that unless there is an energy already attached to their Cinccino, they can only get 5 attacks that turn with 2 Archeops, which gets them to 350. So they physically can't KO that Drago, and then with the existing damage on the Lugia, it means that you can go Temple, Kyurem, take 4 next turn if they have both of their rats in play. So that was like what you're meant to do, because then it just opens up the late game of like, oh, I just close it out by KOing like any 2 prizes that you have, which is really easy to do usually if you can hold Legacy Star, especially with Temple. But yeah, I feel like it would have been much stronger into Lugia if I had Gudra. So that would have been sick. The list overall, though, I was really happy with. I did the testing. I felt very confident into almost every matchup. I think that was the big thing also that made me want to play Drago, is it dead set is just the best deck in format, because it just has answers for everything. And every deck is trying some way to counter it. Like a lot of our players that were playing Zarb were running just so many different options to try and counter this and play around it. Like Choice Belt, for instance, to allow their Radzard to just one-shot a Drago at any point. And I think that, like, you know, looking back on it now and being like, okay, they're like, a lot of people are overtaking, and really the only 2 techs that Drago is running in retrospect is like Temple for Lugia and Canceling Cologne for Manaphy and Iron Thorns, and I guess Mimikyu. Canceling Cologne was also broken in the control matchup. I played 1 control deck, and being able to recycle Canceling Cologne Prime Catcher off a Legacy Star was just like game ending. There was nothing they could do, so that was pretty good. How did my tournament go? So I'm going to give you like a quick little tournament rundown on how I went. So I ended up going 4-2-2. So I was pretty happy with that. That's a pretty positive record. I felt really happy with how I played. I think that, you know, I didn't really make any super big errors in my gameplay. I think most of the stuff was fine. My 2 losses were just like down to the deck just saying no, which is very unfortunate. And they were both against Lugia, so that's why I always think about like the Gudra if I ran it. Like, could I have played those matchups differently? I think I could have, because I don't think everybody was on the Weirdeer. Some people were, but some people weren't. But round 1, I paired into a Lugia, really nice guy. I get game 1, I brick game 2, and then I am like a turn away from winning game 3, but then time gets called. So I like basically had the game wrapped up, but couldn't resolve it within time, so we ended up tying. So that was a little bit annoying. I definitely felt like I was in control for most of that game. I just wish I hadn't bricked game 2. I won game 1 prizing Temple, which was ridiculous. I don't know how I did it. I think I declared Trifrost twice and cleared like half of his board, and then just cleaned it up with like Radzard or something. It was really stupid. But we take those. Round 2, I paired into a Giratina V-Star Lost Box player. I hadn't seen this deck in ages, but I knew how it functioned because a lot of my friends from locals had played it. Unfortunately for him, he prized Manaphy both games, so I just kind of Kyuremed him for his life savings. He did try and get around it by using Abyss Seeking, but then I was able to just respond with Dragapult's attack and just like set up like 5 KOs in 1 turn. It was really stupid. So that was a good win. Then next round, I paired another Lugia. Game 1, he got it. Game 2, I got it. We get to a game 3 where he opens horrendously going first. And I'm like, this is my chance. I just got to set up, and my deck like gets to squawk, gets to do his thing. And I'm like, I'm not seeing enough of the pieces that I need. He has another turn, which is like nothing. So I'm like, this is it. I just have to take care of this turn. And I'm like so in the ascendancy. And my deck just like finds nothing. It just bricks. And I was like, that's a shame. And then he was able to just get the first KO, which like swings the matchup. And then from there was like too much momentum. And I couldn't keep up, and I ended up losing. So, really nice set, really nice guy. It was just super unfortunate for my deck to be built as streamlined as I wanted it to be, to just kind of whiff when I needed it most, but that's okay. So we're at 1-1-1. We go to the next round where I pair into a Charizard player. Game 1, I just obliterate him. Game 2, I probably get the luckiest break I've ever had playing Pokemon. So, he's playing Unfair Stamp. I go down to 1 prize remaining with a Drago V-Star on the bench and I think not Radzard, it was something else attacking. I can't remember what it was. It was an Ogerpon that attacked Charizard to go down to 1 prize remaining after that. And he goes Iono to 1 and Prime Catcher, no, it didn't Prime Catcher, Counter Catcher KOs with Defiance Band Radzard. So I've got a 3 energy Ogerpon in play, no Fez, no Mew, but I just need 1 energy. If I draw into any kind of energy, I just attach it, KO the Radzard, game's over. Currently I'm doing 150 and he has 160 HP, so it's not quite enough. I have Ultra Ball in hand, I draw for turn, it's another Ultra Ball. I'm like, okay, my Ogerpon can't do anything, I'm going to retreat it into my Kyurem because I know I still have Prime Catcher in deck and this forces him to make a play. So I'm like, pass, go for it. And on his turn, he Turos up his Radzard, puts Pidgeot in the active, rebenches Radzard, passes. I'm like, okay, and he has a Charmeleon on the bench too. I'm like, alright. 2 Ultra Balls in hand, what can we do? I rip off the top a Dragapult, I'm like, cool, Ultra Ball these away, let's get Mew EX. Get Mew EX and say, screw it. Restart for 3. Off of my restart, with him having 2 prizes left and me having 1, I draw Fire Energy, Prime Catcher, Nest Ball. So, there's Nest Ball for Radzard, attach Prime for game. I was like, that's stupid, that shouldn't happen. I mean, if I didn't draw into like the Fire or the Prime, I just Nest Ball maybe for Fez, because then I just find one of my energy retrievals and I can still do the same thing with Ogerpon. Swing in there. So that was a bit silly that it ended up that way, but we take it. I go to my next game, which gets another Lugia. I'm currently 2-1-1. So at this point, I needed to finish 6-1-1. I needed 18 points to make it, and because I had a tie, I had to win my next 4 games in a row to be able to get there. And so I pair into a Lugia, and I get game 1. He gets game 2. We go into a game 3, and I'm like, okay, I just got to like get a good start here. We'll be chilling. I open Squawk, and he flips over his 1 of Fluttermane. I'm like, far out, man. That's not good. And I don't have any other basics in my hand, so I have to start Squawk. I don't have any way to move this Squawk, and it just puts me so far behind. End up losing. Also, game 2 I would have won if I didn't prize Temple. I literally would have thinned through my entire deck with Drago V-Star, and I would have found it. And just because I prized it meant that I couldn't win, so that sucked. I was kind of sick of prizing Temple into Lugia, but it is what it is, and I ended up losing that game because I opened Squawk into a Flutter and just can't play the game. So that's basically how my Worlds run ended, but I was like, you know what, this is like my only chance coming at Worlds as a player. I gotta just keep playing and just have a good time. So next round, I pair into a Gardevoir player. Super lovely guy, but he never played Manaphy. Oh, he didn't bench Manaphy game 1. I Trifrosted his only 3 Rolts in play. And then he like rebenches a bunch of stuff, and I proceed to just reset up a Drago and Trifrost again, and just take another 3, so I just take all 6 and win in game 1. In game 2, he has Manaphy, but has to open it, and I just immediately Dragapult KO it, and then proceed to Trifrost again, and then Legacy Star to Trifrost again. So I basically win the game in like 15 minutes by declaring Trifrost 4 times over 2 games. It was ridiculous. Like, Guardy is a weird matchup. Obviously, if they can jam a Klefki in the active, it gets a bit annoying. But usually you have like 1 turn to set up. And if you just get that 1 turn and get enough things in play, it's very tough for that deck to come back from that. You can put a lot of pressure on for sure. Cologne is also broken in that matchup. So I was 3-2-1 at that point. I was like, okay, we're kind of cooking. I paired into Iron Thorns next. A really nice guy as well. I raw open Cologne both games. So I guess I'm just built different. And it just allows me to completely set up and just storm game 1. Again, this is a matchup where Goodra is really, really good because Goodra swinging means that they attack and barely even scratch the Drago, so I can get a lot of damage in play to finish it off. So that's another one where I wish I had Goodra. I was able to still get there by declaring Kyurem a bunch because they've been to Chorus to Synasty and didn't play Palpad. Or at least I didn't see the Palpad. And they didn't put down Lost City because I owned it to the bottom. So that was pretty fortunate. I'll take it. The extra Iono kind of coming in clutch there, I suppose. So we're able to get that one. And then I got the second game because, again, I just got to resolve Legacy Star and then just kill, I think, alone Thorns in play with Giratina. And yeah, got that win. Didn't celebrate after beating Thorns 2-0. That would have been silly. We were at 4-2-1. And I was like, okay, we're going to the last round. It was against Control. And I was like, you know what? End of the day, Control. Just have a good time. So game 1, I'm in complete control. He tries to set up a bunch of Cornerstone Mask into me, but Dragapult is broken because damage counters can be put on anything. So I'm able to KO a bunch of his stuff, put a bunch of pressure on, and I'm able to play through all my cards without him disrupting them. Like, he whiffs off Airy, he whiffs off Misfortune Sisters. I get to play like Prime Catcher, Canceling Cologne, Switch, all the things at the right times when I need to. I get down to only having one prize left to take, and I still have my Legacy Star. So I'm like, the game's just done. So I get the first game, we get into the second game, and he just, all the unfortunate luck he had in game 1, he gets returned for in game 2. He just finds like all my good items like immediately, puts a ton of pressure on, and there is just nothing I can do. I end up losing. We get to game 3. There's about 5 minutes left, so I know it's going to end in a tie unless I donk him. He having an okay start. He goes lax on the bench, lax inactive, lax on the bench, and puts down neutralization center. And I was like, okay, this is a little bit scary. Let's see. Look at my deck. Do I have Temple? Temple is prized. So I actually have no way to out this stadium. I have no way to KO these Snorlaxes. And fortunately, time gets called. I mean, fortunately, I mean, like, I knew it was going to be a tie regardless. I could have basically conceded there and said, like, I actually don't have a way to interact with your board. But I mean, he didn't know that. So I was like, I would have taken the tie to finish off the day, 4-2-2. I was pretty happy with that. We were 2 wins away from making it to day 2, or 2 ties. If those losses were ties instead, then no, that wouldn't have worked. I need 18 points. I need 1 more win. Yeah, but that's okay. I was honestly really happy with how I did. My 2 losses to Lugias were just down to my deck just not being allowed to function, and that sucks. Having Gudra would have helped a lot as well in a lot of those matchups against the Lugias. So that's something I'm going to put on the list in the future. But I felt really good with this list. I felt great with my Worlds run. It was super cool playing against people. I just had a great time. I was having a fun time, smiling, laughing. And yeah, that was it. I was very happy with my last it felt like my last proper competitive event as a player. Like, I'm going to still do like challenges and cups at my local, but I want to really focus on doing more of this judging stuff. And just playing more fun decks and just enjoying playing Pokemon. Like, I love this game so much, and so I want to focus on learning more about the VGC as well, learning more about Go, doing a lot of study into both of those and kind of learning it from scratch. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to build teams myself on my phone, but I'm going to try. And same with VG, I might just do like some rental teams. Then I've got like my Switch here, and I've got an Elgato, so I can do games there. I've also thought about recording games at my locals for VG to kind of do commentary for as well. So I might be able to do that as well. We'll see how we go. But that's basically it, guys. I hope this was enjoyable. I hope that, you liked seeing me doing this stuff again. It's been cool to kind of record this stuff again. I've kind of missed it. So hopefully I'll get back out there with another video. I unfortunately was meant to go to a challenge today. I was going to judge it, but when I was in Hawaii, I actually got a staph infection in my ankle, which wasn't great. Nothing like too major. Easy enough to just get some antibiotics and I will be fine. But I do need to rest it for a couple of days. I thought, what better thing to do than just record a YouTube video? So what I'll be doing over the next couple of days, I think, is just compiling a bunch of VGC teams, some Go information, as well as TCG decks to kind of just go over and discuss in future videos. But yeah, let me know if you enjoyed the video. If there's certain things you'd like to see me do on this channel, please let me know. It's going to be really cool to kind of get back into it and get to recording again. So yeah, thank you guys so much. I'll catch you next time.